Welcome to the Content Strategy Interviews podcast. Each week, we talk with accomplished content strategy experts to share their wisdom with our friends in the content community. And now, here's your host, Larry Swanson.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 7th episode of the Content Strategy Interviews podcast. I'm super psyched today to have Rand Fishkin on the show. Rand is known as the Wizard of Moz. He founded that company originally known as SEO Moz way back in the day, and is now probably one of the leading minds in the internet marketing and online marketing world. Rand, I interviewed you. I asked you onto the show because at the Startup Week event here in Seattle, maybe 2 or 3 months ago, you were on a panel with some other SEOs and talked about the SEO as content strategist, which set my spidey sense tingling. But at the same time, I was like, wait a minute, haven't we always been content strategists? So can you tell me a little bit about sort of the how and why SEOs need to be strategic about content?
Yeah, sure. Well, so you don't have to be strategic about content, but it sure does help. How about that? I think one of the challenges is that historically, many SEOs operated in a very tactical manner, right? So do keyword research relevant to the audience that I want to try to attract, figure out the keywords I want to target, and then build the content that I think can rank the best for those keywords, which is really taking it, that's very much a rankings-driven strategy, right? You take rankings as the ultimate goal, and you reverse backwards from there. When you do content strategy, you're sort of doing the opposite. You're saying, I believe that if I can get an audience in front of this content, it will help my brand, my business goals, my conversions, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. And thus you start from a place of strategic content. This is the world today, but after I create and amplify this content, the world will change in this particular fashion, right? The world of, my particular funnel or the world of whatever you're trying to influence can be changing the world in very tiny ways. But in that world, you start from the perspective of, I want to get people in front of this content. What is that right content to get them in front of? And then you go out and say, now let me figure out how to attract the right audience. That means looking at keywords and looking at search engines, looking at social, looking at other places where I can do amplification, looking at how do I do word of mouth and email and all these other channels. And search becomes simply a channel to attract visitors to your content. So I think from a content strategy perspective, SEO can be a great channel, or from a ranking strategy perspective, content is sort of a necessary element.
Got it. How has that changed over, because you've been at this a little while, and did it used to be more the case that SEOs were more about creating the content themselves, whereas nowadays it's more of somehow looped into the whole organic marketing strategy of a company? How do you think that has changed over time?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think SEOs today are probably creating content at just about the same rate they were in the past. The content that SEOs create is very different today than it was 10, 15 years ago. Back then it was landing pages with, keyword targeting and trying to get, a lot of formulaic stuff right. And today it's really about serving visitor intent and trying to accomplish the searcher's task and trying to be amplification worthy and viral content worthy and those kinds of things. But no, I don't think the balance has shifted in terms of the job role too dramatically. A lot of small and medium businesses still rely on the SEO to get them rankings, which means getting them the content. Many in-house SEOs at larger companies and organizations are also the content creators. At Moz, for example, our SEO folks are also our content folks, right? So I think I suspect that hasn't shifted too much, but I don't have statistical data on that, right? I don't have surveys I've done year to year over the decades. But that's my intuition.
Okay, one thing that got me thinking about that, you did a Whiteboard Friday, I think it was just a week or two ago, about that change to the Google Snippets results, that the description they're showing is longer now. And so there's this whole other part of the world that's concerned with content strategy, like the people who do like big enterprise CMSs and analyze workflows and across an enterprise. That just occurred to me, like, if you think about like that kind of development from that perspective, like you as an SEO immediately want to be able to create a longer description field for your metadata now, but you might have a whole other CMS or other things you're wrestling with. How do SEOs cope with that kind of development? Because that's just one example, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's SEOs who are coping with the fact that URLs in their CMSs aren't structured right. There's SEOs who are coping with the fact that, oh, you know what? The page title is always just the brand name on every page. Sorry, that's how it was built. We can't really change it. We don't even know if the person who built it is still around. So sorry about that. But what can you do for us SEOs? So, I mean, this has been a problem for a very long time. And I think that SEOs have generally found a few ways to work inside and around it. One is to try and set up a separate CMS on the platform, often installing WordPress in a subfolder or something like that, to try and get around it. You see a lot of SEOs who have become more technical so that in a lot of cases they can address these changes themselves, right? And then you see, I think, also especially in the last 5 years, a realization that marketing should drive technology on a website rather than the other way around, right? That the office of the CTO or the VP of engineering or the engineering team has gone from the decision-making org to the service organization inside a company. I think that's absolutely the right thing, right? Technology should be there to serve business goals, not to drive, how things are done. Unless you're trying to build a, technology just so you can patent and sell it, in which case you're not doing a whole lot of marketing.
Right.
But that has been, I think, a very positive change for SEOs, and I've seen a lot less of the sort of, we're just subservient to whatever they want to do, and we don't really have the power and influence to make change here. I've seen a lot less of that in the last 5 years than the 10 before it.
Yeah, because you just mentioned the CMSs that lock you into a certain way to format, or like your title tag if there's with a company name. But yeah, I think, and I agree. It seems like people are getting on board with that. Do you see those mostly as, are they like peer relationships, like the SEO team and the maybe, I don't know, this probably varies a lot from organization to organization, but what do you, I guess maybe let me ask you this, how would you view the optimal way to organize like your content marketing team, your SEO team, your technical team? What do you see as like the optimal way for those folks to get along?
So I really, really like it when you can have small teams of collaborators with different skills all working together, right? So for example, if you said, this team is responsible for the content section of our website, right? And all the content that we produce. And it includes, 2 developers, a designer, 2 content creators, an SEO strategist, and a content strategist, right? Awesome. I love that, right? Now we're all working together. We got design, we got development, we got marketing, we have content. All these people are, right? They're their team. The problem that I see all the time, this happens at Moz too. I don't even know if we're on the good end of this problem, is basically people on team A view people on team B as fundamentally flawed or bad, or, oh, it's their fault, it's their responsibility. Tribalism is something that human beings love and Americans doubly love. Like, we seem to just crave it even more than the rest of the world. We're like, I'm this and you're that, and therefore me good, you bad. And that happens at work too. And so when you separate, developers from designers, from product team, from marketing team, everyone starts to grumble about how it's that other team that causes all the problems. So if you can mash that up and say, nope, you're responsible for this strategic part of the business, and you build a team of people who can accomplish all those things together, and that's the team, it's pretty tough to complain, right? It's sort of like, instead of the developers, engineering caused this problem, it's oh, actually Martha caused this problem, and I'm going to talk to Martha because she sits next to me.
Right. Well, that gets at a couple of things that you've talked, and I can't remember how long ago this was that you articulated it that way, but you kind of stepped back from a management role at Moz to more of an individual contributor role. But you're obviously still concerned with management. It sounds like from what you just said. But anyhow, but I guess flipping back and forth between those two roles. Well, I guess then the other thing I wanted to add on to that is one of the core principles you helped articulate at Moz is part of the tag fee was empathy, and that seems to be rising to the top every time I hear you talk lately. That seems to be part of your message. So between those two things, like between that, the challenges of negotiating both like across those teams, like you're talking about, and up and down as an individual contributor versus a manager, I guess maybe tell me about how empathy helps you navigate all that.
I mean, the core principle behind empathy is I want to be able to emotionally and intellectually put myself in someone else's shoes so that I can feel their pain and their problems, so that I can understand things from their perspective. And by doing that, you can get a better relationship between yourself and people, above you, next to you, on different teams, that sort of thing, right? So, I put myself in the shoes of developers, and I see that I have a big backlog of items. I have a list of things, right, that I'm supposed to accomplish. I know that development is often, a lot of hurry up and wait, right? So, okay, now I have all the specs that I think I need, but actually it's missing these two things. And until I understand these two things, I don't want to write one line of code, because it could all be throwaway stuff if it turns out that these two things are not the way they're supposed to be. So I bring those back to, whoever it is, the product team, the marketing team, and I say, I've got to know this before I build you anything. And then, a week of discussion and meetings and everything else, and then they get back to me and then they say, okay, but 3 weeks ago you told us it would be done today. So is it almost done? No, I haven't started working on it because, right, okay, now we've achieved some empathy. Right, we have some thought process for like how that's gone on, and I think that can be very, very helpful in being able to understand and plan and work well with other team members.
Is that part of where those kind of cross-disciplinary teams you talked about, where you have developers?
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to do that when you're literally working side by side.
Oh my God. Right? It's so hard when they're on another floor or in another building, or, and you never see them, and they're sort of mysterious. And the only email, communications you get from them is emails saying, I need this spec, or it's going to be 2 weeks behind when I said it was going to be. You build them up as villains in your mind. And and when you work side by side, you see what they're doing, and you share some meals together, and things change.
That's interesting, and that gets at how can we carry those lessons of sitting there side by side into our online relationships, because that's what we're all doing this for, is to hopefully engage some people. And well, I guess, and let me make that more specific. Like, how do you do that with content? Because you've talked a fair amount about that, about how to make content that's you've got a pretty good list that you've put together. I can't rattle it off the top of my head.
Oh, the 10x content list.
Yeah, the 10x. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That was a Whiteboard Friday, I think. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So if you go to, I think it's what is it?
And I'll link to this in the
bit.ly/10x content, but the X is capitalized. So 10 capital X content. That will take you to, basically, it's just a Google Doc that I keep adding to as I find, remarkable and amazing things on the internet. And you can see there's a list up at the top that sort of says, here's the criteria: provides a uniquely positive user experience through the interface, visuals, layouts, fonts, patterns, etc. Delivers content that is some substantive combination of high quality, trustworthy, useful, interesting, and remarkable. Is considerably different in scope and detail from other works on similar topics. Loads quickly and is usable on any device or browser. Creates an emotional response of awe, surprise, joy, anticipation, or admiration. There's a few other ones. I won't read the whole thing. But basically, it's this idea that remarkable content, right? Content that sails across the web, that everyone in this particular niche has seen and experienced, and they have a shared understanding around it because it's been so broadcast. That type of stuff is powerful, right? And I do not think 10x content is what you should invest in with every content effort. It's just not required. It's not needed, and it's an extremely demanding practice. But should you have a few cornerstone pieces that are 10x content? Or should you go through a list of 10x content like this one and say, boy, I'm kind of feeling inspired. Like if there was a this that solved this problem for my audience, or that explained this phenomenon for my community, that would be incredible. I want to be the person who creates that, right? I want to be able to put that out on the web and be proud of it. I think in a way, look, content strategy and marketing, yes, we are serving customers. Yes, we're serving business goals. But I think when content is really special, when people get truly inspired, it becomes art, right? It's something that we do for ourselves. It's something that we do to be proud of. It's something that we do where we say, you know what? I made that. And whether it helps us get more free trials or close more business, that's fine. It's nice. But I feel special about having created that. It gets me out of bed in the morning to know I might get to work on another one, right? And I think that can serve a different kind and a very special kind of goal, and maybe something that's a little bigger than I go to work every day, right?
Right. When you did that Whiteboard Friday about the 10x content, you kind of it was almost like you kind of set it up. You said, "Oh, you could do this kind of content, or that kind of content, that kind of." Oh, but wait, there's this cool new one, and that's that Eureka moment that every artist aspires to.
Yeah.
Have you thought more since that broadcast about it's kind of getting to the very nature of productivity and creativity here, or productivity in a creative profession, I guess. But have you thought more about how to kind of gather and then cull from the list of possibilities like that cool thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that having goals and having maybe an internal vision both help with that, right? So an internal vision is, look, I am incredibly passionate about doing this. I care about it deeply personally, and I feel like I can do something unique and authoritative. That is something that should be considered. And I think, unfortunately, it's often ruled out in favor of, look, we're trying to accomplish these 4 things. How does your passion for X help us accomplish these 4 things? Like, no, get that off the table and focus on the goals. Well, actually, it turns out in the world of creativity and content and marketing, having true passion and having deep interest and deep empathy for the audience of consumers, those are really powerful drivers of exceptional content. And so I think businesses are actually foolish to ignore that power. I would say, the other thing that can certainly help you, and you should use, and I think everyone by default does use, is, hey, does this meet the goals, right? So if the fundamental goals of the content are, look, we need to reach this audience, we're trying to get them to mostly know about our brand. So this needs to do a solid job of being branded and being memorable and associated with the brand. Or if it's, hey, we really are trying to capture email addresses here, right, that we can market to later. Or we're trying to reach the biggest audience of people possible in this group so that we can do retargeting to them later, right? So all we need is the cookie. We just want the visit. That's the most important thing, and therefore breadth is critical. And if it's a little clickbaity, that's going to be okay. So those types of goals can drive some of the things that you put on the table or take off for the project. And then I think it's also good to have some feasibility included, right? So like, I can do this. We have the ability to do this, right? I have the team who can do this. If you think to yourself, oh man, I want to gather these 50 million pieces of data, and then I'm going to build a machine learning model that's going to be trained on this data set, and it's going to be able to filter out from this other data set the winners and losers. And then I'm going to be able to visually illustrate that through a series of interactive graphs and charts. Well, it turns out you don't have an interactive designer. You don't have anyone who under you who does machine learning models. You yourself are not capable of installing TensorFlow and playing around with it and figuring it out. And by the way, you only have a week to do this, so you know what? Scale back, right? We got to scale back the ambition there. And I think that's fine, right? I think using feasibility, using goals, and then using your creativity and your personal passion, those can all be ways to filter.
But it sounds like if you've cultivated all those things you just talked about, that awareness, a clear focus on your business goals at the time, and all that stuff, like if you have that kind of in mind as you proceed, when those eureka moments come along, you'd be like, aha, that's the one. Is that kind of how it's worked with you? Or
Yeah. And I think, there's something, two things have been really, really helpful for me. One is having the ability to do many things myself, right? So for me, the technical side is tough, but I'm good at visuals. I'm decent enough at Excel or Google spreadsheets to be able to mess around in those and pull some information. And I have a big audience, so doing surveys has worked really well for me. I have a lot of network connections, so reaching out to people and asking for contributions or thoughts or opinions, or a favor to review something, that's worked well. Good example. Recently, I just got back data from JumpShot, which is a clickstream data provider down in California. And Moz has been working with them. We pay them for some data. They give us some stuff for free that I have talked about at MozCon and other places. And I just got back this big data dump that I was asking for, and they did a lot of the processing for me. So this data is relatively clean, and so now I can build some really, really amazing things. I'm going to be able to show over the last 2 years the percent of Google searches that result in no click, an ad click, or a click on organic. And that trend is, I would say, mildly unnerving, right? Especially in the last 6 months, it's gotten a little scary in that Google search continues to grow, at least from a seasonal perspective, month over month. But even though it's growing, the number of searches that result in a click is staying pretty flat. So Google is consuming a lot of those searches themselves, which makes sense, right? More and more featured snippets, more instant answers, more knowledge boxes, right? That kind of stuff. But SEOs have been real nervous about this. Like, what's going to happen here? Do I have to be concerned? And the answer is, well, I wouldn't be panicked yet, but I keep watching these numbers, because maybe SEO opportunity is not growing at the same rate that it was growing, the last 20 years.
But there's been changes like that before, I guess. But you've demonstrated, I think, throughout your whole career, this commitment to organic marketing, whatever form, especially SEO. How, like what you just said, though, it is alarming and a little scary. In fact, a couple weeks ago, I talked to Dwayne Forrester, and we talked about voice search and how that's changing search. And what if we get to that point where you're getting one search, the SERPs is one voice answer from Alexa or something like that?
Yeah, and there's a lot of those today. Yeah, there's a lot of that already. One thing I would tell you here's why I would tell you not to be scared about that. So far, the data looks like voice search, as much as it's grown, is not cannibalizing desktop and mobile. Sorry, wait, let me rephrase that. Voice answers are not cannibalizing answers that are provided by a screen. Voice search doesn't worry me at all. Voice search is just a convenient way to type in a query, right? It doesn't matter at all. It doesn't change anything. But voice answers changes, to your point, right? Alexa giving you one answer back, or Google Home giving you one answer back. That's truly different, right? That's not a screen giving you an answer. And what I'd say is the data that we're looking at shows search growth over the last 2 years continues to grow at a nice clip. And this is search that results in a screen giving you a list of answers, right? A search result, like you're used to on a desktop or mobile or tablet device. So I wouldn't panic about that. It looks to me, I think much like mobile did not destroy desktop, it just added to it. It looks to us like voice answers are just adding to search, not taking away from existing search.
So kind of like radio not displacing newspapers and TV not displacing this, just the same. Right. So is most of that, Dwayne said something about how hard it is to get data about that, but is most of that new traffic then coming just from those devices, from Alexa and Cortana, or those new?
Yeah. So I don't have data about how many voice answers are being provided, but what I do have is the number of searches that that result in a browser giving you a screen of results. And since we know from Google and Alexa and Cortana and these other places and Siri, right, that voice answers have grown dramatically, right? That there are billions of these voice answers being provided every month. We should interpret, if that is having a cannibalization effect, we should see a slowing growth rate or a plateau or a downward trend, and that's not the case in screen results.
Well, that's it. So back to what you were saying about that the search volume's going up, but the
clicks are not.
The clicks are not going up. Do you see that as a solvable problem then? That it's just something you guys you and the other geniuses in the field haven't, because I've been doing it, following and doing SEO for like 20 years, and I'm just always amazed at how you smart guys figure stuff out and go, wait a minute,
Yeah, I mean, so let's see. The way I think about that, I think the optimistic viewpoint I'd have is 5 years ago, you and I would say there's incredible opportunity in SEO right now today, right, in 2012. Well, guess what? We are many, many times bigger in that opportunity than we were in 2012, right? Like 4 to 5 times as big. And so given that is the case, I think a plateauing amount of clicks available for SEO is not that terrible a thing, right? I mean, it sucks that the pie isn't growing as fast as it used to be growing, but it's still massive, right? It's sort of like saying Americans watch, I don't remember what it is, 4.5 or 5 hours of television a day on average, which sounds insane to me, but that number has plateaued over the last 30, 40 years. You know what? Still a tremendous amount of opportunity in television. TV ads have continued to go up in price. They've gone up in creativity. People are still investing in television programming and content. So it's by no means a dead medium. It's just that the pie isn't growing like it grew from the 50s through the 80s. Okay, that's all right. Yeah, I think we can deal with that as an industry.
Right. Even after all the low-hanging fruit is gone, there's still plenty of opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, as long as search engines exist, you want to do whatever you can to make sure that you have a chance of appearing there.
Absolutely.
So that's good. Hey, I want to just point out we're coming up on a half hour. I can't believe how quickly this went, and I want to honor your time. But I feel like I could talk to you forever, but I want to honor your time too. But anything last, like, while you have the ear of my audience, is there anything that I haven't brought up, or just in general about the world of SEO or content, or anything that's on your mind, like blockchain? I don't know, whatever interesting developments that you're kind of following and think.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the big one, the one that everyone's talking about, and the one that will likely have, in my opinion, is the biggest risk for web marketers, is the end of net neutrality here in the United States. Right. So for folks who don't know, that we're recording this on December 15th, but I think, 2 days ago, Ajit Pai, the head of the SEC, Trump's new head of the SEC, basically voted to dismantle the Title II protections that were keeping net neutrality, the law of the land in the United States. And he did so at the urging of a couple of million fake, looks like mostly Russian comments that were left in an automated fashion from bots, supporting this dismantling for the FCC, and ignoring the 3 million comments from real people, Americans who wanted it preserved. Net neutrality is an interesting issue. I'm not actually aware of many issues like this, but net neutrality is one of the only issues in the United States that is truly bipartisan. So more than 75% of Republicans support preserving net neutrality. More than 80% of Democrats support preserving net neutrality. So it is something that almost all Americans really, really want, and we should. It is something that allows web marketers and allows websites to exist in their current format. And so I think that and with their current levels of access, I think that over the next 10 to 15 years, we will see a very different kind of internet. One where, if you register a new website today and you host it, right? You and I, Larry, we started a new website. It's randomlarryspodcast.com. And anyone in the United States can reach our website just as fast with, by paying their ISP the same amount by doing nothing else, that they can reach Google or Amazon.com or Netflix or any other website. And that, I think, is awesome. That's this even playing field, right? Location doesn't matter anymore. You don't have to pay bribes to anyone. You don't have to pay higher rent to be accessible to anyone. It's truly democratized. And that, I think, is beautiful for entrepreneurship. I think that embodies the best things about the internet and America. But in this new world, I think it's very likely that years from now, it will be a slow process, right? The ISPs don't want to make us regret this decision right away, right? So they'll take their time so that we barely notice, and it's only 10 years from now that we look back fondly on this era as like, hey, remember when? So probably, many years from now, what we'll have to do is we register our website, Rand and Larry's Podcast, and then we'll have to go to ISPs. We go to Comcast, Cox, Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, all the other ones, CenturyLink, whoever, right? And we say, hey, we want our website to load fast on you. And they're like, okay, well, you can pay these 4 plans to us. And, if you pay the highest tier plan, you'll be almost as fast as Google and Amazon. Well, how do we want to be as fast as Google and Amazon? Oh, well, you got to talk to our sales team, and that's enterprise pricing. And then you negotiate with each of the ISPs. And only after you do that and pay tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year will you be as accessible as the big guys, right? And they'll all make backdoor deals. So maybe Amazon makes a deal with Comcast to make Walmart load slow or not even work, right? So now I'm on Comcast and I go to Walmart.com. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, with your connection, Walmart is not available. But please come check out Amazon.com. We have everything Walmart does at lower prices, right? And so it's those kinds of deals. The internet will work a lot more like television. If we wanted to start a new TV station today, that's a lot of work, right? That's a ton of people you got to pay, a bunch of hoops you got to jump through, and the web will probably end up working that way, unless this net neutrality, protections come back. But in order to do that, the problem is, you wouldn't just have to, you'd have to change out a lot of political offices to do that, and that would be a true struggle.
Right. Yeah, and that's and like you were saying, like how slowly it could unfold, and I almost wonder if they would do that intentionally to keep.
Oh yeah, of course.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally get that. So
I mean, they're evil, but they're not dumb, right? So they understand. Comcast understands, for example, that if they were to make this change tomorrow, the American people would revolt and they'd be very angry and they'd put political pressure, on all sorts of elected officials to repeal or to, put in place these laws. But they know that, if we don't do anything for a year and then we do just like one little tiny thing where, oh, hey, we now offer a free tier of internet. Anyone can get free internet in Seattle. It only has these 5 websites accessible now, right? And those 5 websites pay Comcast to be accessible on the free tier. And if you want to pay Comcast to be accessible on their free tier, you can. And Comcast is like, it's free internet. What are you talking about? That's not a bad thing. Well, you know what? It seems like it's not a bad thing, but in a lot of ways, pretty bad thing. Yeah. So those are the types of things, right? They'll make it look politically viable, make it look good. And then over time, it'll become more and more tenuous.
Well, I'd hoped to end on a less dystopian note, but I think seriously, that is like probably the most important issue facing this industry right now, and behooves all of us to be proactive about that and try to be not like.
Well, one thing I would urge marketers to do is just keep the pressure up. The fight is not over. We can continue to fight for this. And the second thing I would urge you to do is be thinking long-term about your barnacle content and barnacle SEO strategy, right? So if you can no longer build your website as the home on the internet that will be accessible to everyone, think about where and how you might need to do that in the future and how to be successful with that. If I need to be a contributor on LinkedIn, or if I need to have a platform on WordPress, or I need to be thinking about how I can build my audience on Medium, on Twitter, right? These places where, they're big guys, they'll pay off all the ISPs, they'll have those backdoor relationships. That's probably a smart thing to be thinking about.
Let me ask you one last question about that, because like there's this conventional wisdom, especially in the small, scrappy entrepreneurial space, about your mailing list as your thing and your
Yeah.
individual website as you want to control your own web destiny. But the barnacle strategy, yeah, maybe we need to revisit that. It sounds like.
Well, I mean, I think consider it as the alternative if and when this sort of dark path becomes a reality. But yeah, unfortunately, there are countries where this is already the case. I think Portugal has some of this, especially on their mobile web. A few other places too.
Yeah. Well, bless you. Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Rand. This has been super edifying conversation. I'm really happy to have you on, and hope I can check in again soon. Like I said, there's a gazillion other things I'd like to talk to you about.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Well, next year I'll have a new company and be doing something entirely new. So yeah, would love to check in.
Yeah, I'll leave that hanging as a mystery, but I'm super intrigued about your new venture, and I'll just let people follow you to learn more about that.
Yeah. No news yet to report, but I'll have something in the next few months.
Okay, stay tuned, everyone.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Rand.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. Great to be here.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening. Tune in next week for another content strategy interview.